All right. Hello, my name is Vivian, and I'm one of the co-directors of journalism at Youth Insights. And today I am joined with Jennifer, who is a YA novelist, and she will be basically sharing her insights on creative writing. So before we get started with the interview, Jennifer, can you please introduce yourself?
Thanks for having me, Vivian. My name is Jennifer, as you well know, and I am a mom to two teenage boys, and I'm married to Mark. I work part-time at a local library, and I have a twin sister who, if we were one person, we would be perfect because we're exact opposites.
That's really great. Okay, so let's get into the bulk of the questions. So the first question I have for you today is one that we usually ask a lot of our interviewees, and it is, what really sparked your interest to pursue a career in creative writing?
As a kid, I was a voracious reader, and I loved stories. And so I think I remember reading like Little Women and thinking to myself, like, I wanted to be Jo, who was the writer. And I also wanted to be like Louisa May Alcott and and do what she did and tell stories. And so I think that was kind of one of the first times that I realized that, I was interested in creative writing.
I've actually never read Little Women. I've seen the movie, and it was really great. I think that the relationship that the sisters have with one another is a very inspiring story, and I'm glad that you shared that. Um, Moving on to kind of building off of how your interest was first evoked, what was kind of your pathway to becoming a published author, and how have you matured and grown as a writer upon publishing your first novel?
Well, my path to becoming a published author is a very indirect path. I actually started out in journalism and went to university for journalism. And I didn't make the cut for my second year. I missed the cutoff mark by like a fraction. And I was devastated. But at that time, I had told myself that I didn't have the imagination to be a creative writer. And so I thought journalism was a good second choice because I could tell other people's stories. But that failure of not getting into journalism actually propelled me to become a creative writer now, because I graduated with a degree in English. And although I had other jobs in non-writing areas, I kept writing. I wrote articles for magazines and newsletters of organizations I belonged to. And I just kept writing. And then I began to blog. And I wrote kind of a memoir nonfiction book. And from there, I joined a writing group, and they encouraged me to try fiction. And so I attended a workshop for fiction writers, and then signed up to write during National Novel Writing Month, or NaNoWriMo, as some people know it. And that was in 2017. And that first time I did NaNoWriMo was my first draft of Exit Stage Right, which was my debut novel.
I think that was really inspiring. I really like how you talked on how you initially failed within your like primary career pathway, but it really goes to show that you can really rebound from your failures, and even though you fail at first, it can become kind of a perpetual route of future successes. So that was really great. And kind of building off of that, could you maybe describe your creative writing process and how you generally employ various literary elements such as plot, character, and setting to construct a cohesive story?
Sure. Um, Part of the writing process for me is setting aside time to write. And so for me, it's early morning. During NaNoWriMo, I get up at 5 a.m. and write till 7. And generally whenever I'm writing, I try to write early morning because that's my best time. So the actual writing process, there's either a plotter or a pantser. And as you can tell by the words, the plotter plots out their outline, or the pantser kind of flies by the seat of pants. And so I am a pantser. I have my characters flushed out a little bit, my two main characters, but and I have an idea of what I want to write about, and I know the ending, but in between, I have no idea, and I just let the characters take me on that kind of adventure. And so that's my writing process. But what I'm learning is that for every writer, it's different and unique to the writer. And so you can have some best-selling authors who are plotting everything out, or you could have, I've heard different authors sit down and talk about how they had no idea what was going to happen in the book, but it came about and it was still a bestseller. So it really, there is no right way to have a writing process. It's individual and unique to each writer.
I think that was a very unique take on just the general writing process. I know a lot of writers like to go with the flow and others prefer a more structured approach, but I really like how you maybe just outline the ending and then kind of go with the flow from there. And I think that's really the beauty of storytelling. There's really no right or wrong way to execute a story. It's really just the root of the story itself that matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you have written several YA novels, including Exit Stage Right and Face Off.
Mhm.
So, based on your past successes, what is some advice you would give to any aspiring high schooler who hopes to pursue a career in creative writing or journalism or anything within that field?
Well, practically speaking, you need to read and read and read and read. So I typically read over 100 books a year. And I've done that for probably about 5 years because reading is research. And you would be surprised how much you pick up like subconsciously while you're reading a book. And because you start to learn the flow of a novel and the flow of a plot and how characters are developed. And even though you don't realize it, when you actually sit down to write, it actually comes back to you. And so you want to read, and especially if you're going to pick a genre to read, like if you're going to want to write YA, then read as much YA as you can, but also read outside that and read like nonfiction, read mystery, read, romance, horror, whatever, because it makes you a better writer all the way around. And then kind of more of on a personal note, I would want to tell aspiring writers not to listen, not to let anybody tell you that you can't do it. And that includes yourself, because sometimes we are our worst enemy and it's our own inner critic that silences us. So you need to tell those naysayers to kind of get lost. And sometimes that means your inner critic too.
Yeah, I really liked your point about kind of facing your inner critic because I feel like the biggest critic is obviously ourselves, and we tend to criticize ourselves based on little things. Um, and, you know, being a writer obviously takes a long process of really finding your style as a writer and kind of finding your stance within the realm.
Yeah,
And I think you touched on those points really beautifully.
thank you.
So, as a successful author of various YA novels, are there any stories you would change or rework if you were given the opportunity?
Um, I I probably wouldn't change a lot. I think any writer would like to go back to something and improve it. I would maybe want to go back and delve into the character, a little bit more in depth, maybe than I did the first time around. But other than that, I don't think there's a whole lot I would want to change.
All right. Kind of building off of that, you mentioned within your bio that you had an initial fear or apprehension with writing fiction. So, what is something that compelled you to overcome your initial fears of writing, and how has that allowed you to really grow as an individual?
That's a really great question. Uh, what compelled me to actually overcome my fear first was the writing group that I joined, they were very encouraging and supportive once I expressed that, I would like to write fiction, but I didn't think I was good enough. And so they believed in me, and I started to believe that maybe I could do it too. And so that's another thing I would recommend joining a writing group, because it's a brainstorming session with people who are going, you can brainstorm with them, they'll support you and believe in you. And I think it's so important for a writer to be a part of a writing group. And so they really helped me overcome that fear. And I think, as a person, learning to overcome that made me realize that there's probably a lot more that I could do that I'm just afraid to do. And I just need to actually step out and do it and believe in myself. And because I've had success writing, that just gives me the encouragement to, step out in other areas of my life and, do that hard thing.
I think that was very like motivating, inspiring. I think a lot of young writers out there would probably be able to learn something from that. I know with several different areas, even without writing, it can be challenging to really put in the first few steps.
Yeah.
But being able to overcome that initial fear will definitely bring you some fulfillment later on.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of branching off of that and kind of talking more about your creative flow in writing novels and any written composition, what is really your primary motivator or drive for creating these novels? What really inspires you?
I think what I originally wanted to write because I wanted to make a difference. And so I think there is a lot of power within storytelling. Sometimes we get tired of hearing self-help things, and but if a good message is couched in a really great story, uh, I find people are more open to listening. And so I think that's really what motivates me, that you can make people change and inspire them, not make them, but inspire them to change through a really good story.
That is very true. I think it really takes a story that really touches to someone's soul, that allows them to view things in a newer perspective and truly find the world in kind of a new light. I've read tons of books in my life, and there are many different stories that have really changed my perception on how different things come to be. I think
Yeah.
that's very significant.
Yeah.
Um, and while writing is often a stimulating and fulfilling process, it can undoubtedly be strenuous at times, I'm sure, especially when generating new ideas and finding that initial inspiration. So, have you ever encountered writer's block or burnout throughout your career? And if so, what methods do you usually employ to combat these difficulties?
Yes, I've experienced both. Actually, just coming off kind of a burnout. And so I took the month of December off. I have worked pretty much nonstop with my writing since COVID began in March 2020, because I was off work. And so I had lots of time. And so I've done a lot of work over the last year and a half, but I didn't actually take a rest. And so I had some personal issues happen and losses in November. And so I got really burned out. I didn't really want to write anymore. And I actually didn't win NaNoWriMo this year because I didn't like the story I was writing, and I was dealing with some personal things. So when I realized I was probably hitting some burnout, I took the month of December off because I just was like, this isn't fun anymore. And I need to just rest my brain and and enjoy something else. And so I used that time to enjoy the holidays and, bake and decorate and just enjoy being. And so I think rest is very important. And I should have rested earlier on so I didn't hit burnout. So that was a lesson learned. As far as like daily writer's block and, just, having minor burnout, I think the best way to combat that, at least that I have experienced, is sometimes you need to take that creativity elsewhere. So if if you're a painter or a sewer, or, you bake or whatever, just do something else creative rather than writing. And I think sometimes when you're hitting writer's block, going and reading a good book sometimes can inspire you to get back to your own work and the ideas start to flow. And another thing that I find works is just going out for a brisk walk, or, exercise, yoga, whatever. Because subconsciously your mind might be working on whatever it is that it's stumbled upon. But, you're creating a diversion for your mind. And so it just gives you space to kind of work it out and enjoy something else. And so I found, that kind of thing, exercise, reading, and taking creativity elsewhere has helped me when I struggle.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's really important to understand as a writer and even an individual, giving yourself time to breathe and, prioritizing your mental health and well-being really makes an impact on the quality and level of whatever you produce. So being able to take your mind elsewhere and then return with more energy and more inspiration is definitely crucial as a writer as well.
Yeah, I would say it's as important as the writing process. You need to take care of yourself.
Yeah, I agree. And kind of branching off of any general challenges and including burnout, um, I'm sure that many writers often experience, or they read comments or feedback from the readers and criticism. So my question for you is, do you ever read any comments or feedback from your writers? And if so, how have the opinions of others really influenced you as a writer? Has the criticism assisted your development as a writer constructively or acted as an initial barrier in achieving success?
So I do read comments and feedback from writers. I actually enjoy reading them. Um, and so I find them valuable because I think it can help you become a better writer, especially if people are coming, if it's the same comment, or constructive criticism coming more than once. So I think you can learn from that. I have beta readers who read early manuscripts too. And so their comments and general constructive criticism, suggestions, I find it invaluable, and I take them into consideration as I go back into revisions and editing. And um, so for beta readers, I think it's especially important to take their suggestions into consideration. As far as the people who are really critical, I think you have to kind of gonna go into that open-minded, and kind of be able to tell the difference between people who are, just trolls and people who really are trying to offer constructive criticism. And again, it's a fine line between letting it defeat you and learning from it. Um, and so my editor has always said to me, I'm giving you suggestions, but if it doesn't ring true for the story or the plot, or the characters, then like you're the author. And so I think you do that the same with with criticism. Does it ring true for your character or for your plot? And if it doesn't, then you know what, just chuck it out. But I have let criticism stop me, and again, it was my own criticism, because I was like, oh well, there's been times where I thought, oh, I'm not good enough, or I can't do this, or this is terrible. And so that's what stops me. So it's more my own criticism that I really have to watch out for.
Yeah, and I think you touched on kind of criticism in the past about you being kind of an internalized critic. But I think as a writer, you're always going to be, getting feedback and criticism from your readers. So being able to really internalize it and deciding which one is constructive or which one might not be as constructive toward my own writing. And really differentiating between that is definitely very integral.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. Based on your personal bio, you mentioned that you studied ballet at the Royal Academy of Dance. So how have your experiences and affiliations with dance influenced your writing?
So I studied the Royal Academy dance curriculum. I didn't actually attend like a boarding school, um, but I wish I would have. That would have been fantastic. But my experience with dance has influenced my writing because when I went to write Exit Stage Right through NaNoWriMo, because it's a very quick 50,000 words in 30 days, I wanted to write something that I knew, and I know dance. And so I thought, well, I'm going to structure a story around a ballerina. And so that influenced what story I chose to tell, because I didn't have to research it. And knew enough that even after the first draft was written, I didn't have to go back and do a whole lot of research in regards to the ballet. And as a kid, too, I loved reading novels about dance and ballet and sports. And so I wanted to incorporate that. And so that would be how, those affiliations influenced me.
That's really great to hear. And I'm sure a lot of authors like to draw on their personal experiences when writing. So
Mhm.
it's really great to hear from your story and your background and seeing how it influenced your own writing. Um, so my last question for you is a little bit more thought-provoking. So in your opinion, what do you believe are the most integral elements of storytelling?
Um, in my opinion, I think as a writer and reader, you want to like the protagonist. You really want, as a writer, for your reader to root for them. And so I think having a likable, flawed protagonist is integral to storytelling. And on top of that, because you want to have a flawed character, because a perfect character is boring, that brings about conflict. And I think that is the second most integral part of storytelling. You want to have conflict. You want to have outer conflict in situations and circumstances, relationships. And then you also want to have that internal conflict within the protagonist's mind. You want to have conflict going on all, because it drives the plot. Because if you don't have conflict, you don't have, like, the plot just will die. And so character development and conflict are, I think, two of the most important parts of storytelling. And then personally, I always like a little romance thrown in, but that's up to whoever. Some people might want some horror, some people might want some paranormal, that sort of thing, mystery. So it's kind of up to you for those other little details, and that's where choosing a genre comes in too.
Yeah, and I think character development and conflict are probably the most significant aspects of a story, because the conflict really just drives the interest in the plot itself. If there's no conflict, there's really no cohesive plot or interest. And I actually spent some time watching several movie reviews. And one thing that was always brought up was character development, as well as writing a cohesive conflict. Being able to kind of connect the two together and, develop or kind of see the impact of certain conflicts and certain aspects of the plot and how they influence the character, I think is really important in storytelling. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, it was great that you touched on that. Um, I think that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for joining me today. It was really great to see your perspective on being a novelist, how you would interpret various story elements, and how you deal with criticism and burnout. We have actually linked Jennifer's social media and any prevalent links below, so I highly encourage you to check them out. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Vivian. It was really great to be here. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to pause the recording.